slides right and left. You'll see the green light. It's on. Okay. You see the green light? It's on.
Package off.
Right in front of it. Speak into it.
Okay.
Stand up and down. Okay. Point. All right. Yeah. Well, one of you is going to have to
Yeah.
share. So
Yep. And this is on right now?
this is on. You see the green light.
Oh, you didn't? All right.
I'm going to call the hearing of the Committee of Government Services and Operations to order. Delia. I'm going to ask Legislator Reggie Whitten to lead us in the pledge. Thank you, Legislator. Mr. Clerk, if you would please do the call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Government Service and Operation Roll Call. Legislator Carrier Salage.
Here.
Legislator Joshua Lafazan.
Here.
Thank you. Filling in for Ranking Member Arnold Drucker, we have Delia DeRiggi Whitten. Thank you for joining us. Legislator Thomas McKevitt. Legislator John Giuffre. Vice Chairman Denise Ford.
Here.
Thank you, ma'am. Chairman John Ferretti. We have a quorum,
I'm here.
sir. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So we're here today because last year many of our offices started receiving phone calls from contractors regarding license applications. Those applications were properly filed with the Office of Consumer Affairs, but were not processed timely. As of October of last year, there was a backlog of over 800 new applications, more than 5,000 renewals. In the meantime, some of these businesses, they had their licenses lapse, costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're going to have some questions today about the department, but before we get started, if you have a very brief opening statement, Commissioner.
Sure. Thank you very much. My name is Commissioner John Rick Capisi. My experience, I have 37 years in the police department. 27 of those years were in a supervisory capacity. One of the first things I learned is when I go to a new unit or a new place to work, I learn the functionality as to what that unit does, or in this case, what Consumer Affairs does. I learn about the staff and what they do, and I assess and evaluate the policy and procedures that are in place. Unfortunately, I discovered the prior administration really crippled this agency, and I'm going to get into that. One of the first things that you mentioned, sir, is about license backlogs. I immediately addressed that issue. New applications, we were 1,460 to be reviewed. As of March 3rd, we're down to 1,009, so we reduced that backlog. As far as renewals, we had 5,864. As of March 3rd, we're down to 2,275. Okay, so that's an issue of licensing backlogs. We also have an issue with consumer complaints. The prior administration made backlogs the only priority of Consumer Affairs, and some consumer complaints have not been addressed in over 2 years. I find that unacceptable. Hearings, they're sparse and limited, and the hearings are the way we get resolution of complaints and we establish our fines. Also, enforcement was limited and not done in a proper, efficient manner because Consumer Affairs investigators were working on backlogs of licensing and not enforcing the 27 different consumer protection laws. There was a deficiency in enforcement. With these differences in mind, excuse me, I strategized with the staff, who I'd like to really acknowledge is doing a wonderful job. They are fine workers. With them, I addressed these issues. One of the first things I did is I changed licensing procedures in terms of I stopped the policy of cashing checks on applications and renewals that were not properly filled out or had missing information. In other words, we now cash the check when everything's okay. The general feeling was from contractors, you took my money, I have a license. So we want to get away from that. I also revamped the online processing of licenses so only completed license could be submitted and processed. And what that does, it reduces review time by staff and gives the staff more time to do more licenses. We changed the license applications to be more user-friendly. This is an ongoing process. We're trying to make the application not be complicated. We're trying to keep it simple. Okay, the prior administration only emailed outstanding issues on applications, meaning if something was missing or wrong. And they would only accept email in exchange. I have now instituted, they could mail in their missing forms of documents, and they also could come in. We accept walk-ins, and we also will do telephone conversations with the vendor if there's an issue, and we'll try to resolve it that way. I'm trying to give a human touch to Consumer Affairs. I don't want people to think of it as a cold bureaucracy. I want it to be also business-friendly. I met also staffing. Staffing was a major issue. In 2018, you had 33 people in Consumer Affairs. When I came in, we were down to 20. Now I have a county attorney full-time, so I'm up to 21. And I met with OMB. We finalized a staffing issue. We resolved it, so they're allowing me to hire an accountant, 3, 5 new staff, full-time staff members, and 3 part-time staff members, which I think will address a lot of issues with staffing. However, keep in mind, I have 5 members currently eligible this year to retire. Over the next few months, I also plan to make changes in the internal computer programs that we use. As I went in cold, looked at these computer programs, and I found a couple of problems, and with my deputy, we identified certain issues, and we're working with IT to improve them. In regards to fines, the prior administration had a policy of issuing maximum penalties for many violations. I want to work with small businesses to keep businesses in Nassau County. I am in the process of establishing a graduated fine system to achieve our goal of making vendors comply with the law and protect the consumers. This office wants to bring business into compliance instead of putting them out of business. As the backlog is corrected and my policies improve efficiency, I want to reestablish in Consumer Affairs community outreach to educate the general public on scams and unlawful business practices that are occurring. I also want to expand intergovernmental cooperation with local, state, and municipal governments and law enforcement agencies to better protect consumers. I want it to be a partnership, so we're all working together, so we're going down the same path. We're not interfering with other investigations, and I want the community to know what we're doing. By working together, Consumer Affairs can once again become an agency that holds the values and image it once had, and a place where residents, both as a business person and as a consumer, are encouraged to come to our office for assistance and help. Consumer Affairs was once a nationally recognized and respected agency. Together, let us restore the public's trust in Consumer Affairs, and let's be that agency once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your remarks. And just so we're all acquainted with each other, ma'am, I don't think we've met. You are in the Department of Consumer Affairs?
I'm with. My name is Mary Harkins. I'm a Deputy County Attorney, and I'm currently assigned to the Department of Consumer Affairs.
So you're number 21.
I am.
Okay.
I wish I was 21, but no,
Okay.
I'm number 21.
And Mr. Haino, I know that you've worked in the Department of Consumer Affairs for quite a long time, right?
Yeah, since 2004, 17 years.
2004.
2004,
It's almost 20 years.
almost 20.
Oh, God bless. All right. Well, thank you again, Commissioner, for your presentation. We do have some questions. We'll get started now. And you know, I think maybe some of these questions may be better answered by Mr. Haino, just because he's been there for so long, because a lot of my questions have to do with how we got to the point where we had such a backlog. Although I am encouraged to hear that in just a couple months, we've seen the backlog in the licensing almost cut in half, it looks like. Well, more than cut in half in terms of renewals, and about 50% less in the new applications. So that's a great sign, so thank you for that. But I do have some questions just to understand how we got to the point where we even had such an issue. So can you tell me, with regard to that backlog, do you know how many licenses actually expired while in the queue to be processed?
So I don't have the definitive answer on how many actually expired, because a lot of them were also put on hold. And while the renewal process, you're talking about for the renewals, correct?
Correct.
So while the renewal process was going on, a lot of these applications, they were just put on hold during the process. So they actually never technically expired while they were on the hold status from the previous administration. However, when we started requesting these documents from them, there were different policies and procedures which allowed for the backlog to continue to grow. And with that, it was the commissioner had requested that we require a declarations page, which we never had done before. And, you know, with regards to the staffing, the backlog just started piling up because we were, previous to 2018, whenever a contractor would send in a renewal form per se, you would have to have the renewal form, a check, a certificate of insurance, workers' compensation insurance, as well as a lead certificate. If you did not have those documents, we would then mail back the renewal form, giving the contractor the ability to correct the issue that's wrong. When we would get it in the mail, it would then be mailed out and processed. Unfortunately, the change in policy was just to cash the checks and to email them what was missing.
Well, let me stop you. So it was a change in policy to just cash the checks, meaning when the application for renewal came in, the check was cashed immediately?
Correct.
When did that change in policy occur?
2018.
Okay, so from your time working there in 2004 to 2018, the application would come in, the check would not actually be cashed until the application was processed, correct?
Correct. It would be mailed back to the vendor with a note asking them to resubmit with whatever the missing documents were.
And who made the decision to change that policy to cash the checks at the time that the application was submitted rather than when the application was processed?
The former commissioner.
Okay. Now, you just brought something up. I want to make sure I'm clear on it. So there was obviously with this backlog, well, before I get to that, Commissioner Capice, when you became commissioner or acting commissioner, and you looked at this backlog, what was the date that the oldest application in the queue for renewal was dated? In other words, how long were people waiting? What was the longest?
2019.
Okay, so roughly 3 years.
Correct.
Now, Mr. Haino, you indicated earlier that when an application was pending, that the license would not expire. Is that correct?
Right. So in the system, it didn't show up as an expired license. It would just show up in the system as pending.
So in other words, that
Or on
contractor
hold.
contractor would still be licensed, even though they submitted their application and it has not been approved. Correct?
I would say technically, no.
Okay, explain.
Sure. So when a license is on hold, most businesses, most building departments require you to have a physical license with you. As long as your license is on hold, no license would ever print. So therefore, the contractors, if they were applying for a building permit in the townships or the cities or the villages, they had no license to turn in order to pull a permit, which created a lot of issues with regards to the backlog and for them to continue operating their business.
So in other words, if you're a contractor and you want to get a permit to do modification to a residential property, when you go to the local municipality, you have to show your license.
Correct.
And if they were to show their license, it would be expired,
That's correct.
regardless of what Nassau County has in their computer system.
That is correct.
Okay, so when did this backlog begin to really grow?
So the backlog, so the change in policy occurred in 18, and I would say the backlog started about maybe 2019 when, as the renewals were coming in, we switched computer systems from a CARAS system that the county had to, the commissioner created a new APEX system. With that new APEX system is when the policy changed to upload the documents and to basically, we would cash the check, and then they would be put on hold. So I would say it would start probably about mid-2019.
You keep referring to a policy. I thought the policy you were referring to was cashing the check immediately.
Yes.
How does that create a backlog?
It creates backlog because in order to complete the license, we have a multiple step, right? So you mail in an application. The application, as I said, should have the check, the renewal form, should have a certificate of insurance, should have a workers' compensation, and lead certificate. The commissioner then in 2019 decided he wanted to require these contractors to also submit a declarations page. So from the beginning of whenever we issued licenses to up until this change in policy, we never required a declarations page because the certificate of insurance was enough proof to show that they had the proper insurance documents needed. So if they didn't supply the declarations page, they went in, basically the check got cashed, it went into a file cabinet. If the person did submit all the proper documentation, we would then do a sex offender registry check. We would search for judgments. If they were clear on both of those, the renewal would be processed.
And so requiring this declarations page, how exactly did that create a backlog?
It created to the backlog because a lot of the declarations page don't give you in detail what you're actually insured for, right? So some of the declarations page may just say general contractor. And then when you dive deep into the actual declarations page, does it then break down what you're actually insured for? Which an insurance company, when they supply you with a certificate of liability insurance and a description of operations, they list what you're actually insured to do. So, requesting a declarations page is just creating double work for these contractors, which never had to do this, prior in their, history of renewing their license.
Do you know why that this change was made to the policy?
I do not.
It was never said, you never were told what the reasoning was?
No.
Okay. But simultaneously, when this declarations page was required, the policy change also had the county cashing the check upon receipt of the application.
Correct.
Okay. Now, has that policy been changed in the last 3 months?
Effective immediately.
What is the new policy?
The new policy is if the application, both for renewals as well as new applications, are incomplete, they are sent a checklist of what is missing, and they are mailed back to the vendor to resubmit, a complete application.
Okay. And is that one of the reasons why we're seeing a decrease in the backlog?
Absolutely.
And was that suggestion ever made to anybody to the prior commissioner or to anyone else?
Yes, it was.
And what was the response?
The response was that it wasn't my decision.
It wasn't whose decision?
When I brought up to the commissioner that the policy was not a good change, that contractors had, we already had an established policy already that was working, I was told it wasn't my place. Basically, thank you for your advice.
Okay. Well, I mean, we had a budget hearing back in October of 21 where we were talking about these backlogs, and I never heard from anyone about this change in policy. And I'm not saying we should have heard from you. I don't believe you were even here for that, but
Right.
it's just pretty eye-opening, so thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
Aside from this change in policy that you've implemented, Commissioner, over the last couple months, which clearly is working and seems pretty obvious, is there anything else that has been done or you intend on doing to further eliminate this backlog? Or do you think this is sufficient, this change in policy?
No, there's much more we could do. In consultation with the staff and Ken Hino, we decided to implement what I mentioned before. Ken, you want to recap?
Sure. So we created a more user-friendly application that is now online that actually, when a building department contacts our office for what specific type of work that home improvement home improvement contractors do, they always want to know what type of work. Are you doing, roofing, siding, general interior carpentry, right, tiling, masonry? You could go on to all the different subcategories. So in order to make it more efficient and user-friendly for the building departments as well as our office, we've implemented a new application online as well as in paper form to actually dive into the different types of categories that they are looking to do. So by them filling out the correct work that's being done, we match it up with their certificate of insurance, then saving time for us to basically, email or mail the contractor asking for a description, then, a term just as like general contractor.
So it sounds like there's interaction between you and the contractors. You're kind of guiding them through the deficiencies in their application?
Absolutely.
Was that being done?
No.
With previous administration?
No, this, the staff tried, but, when we were accepting applications that weren't complete, we spent a lot of time trying to send emails with regards to what was missing. And when the backlog starts growing and you start emailing contractors what's missing, some of them aren't submitting the correct documentation. You're trying to, maintain a dialogue with them, but it wasn't to the extent that it is now.
Okay. Just talking a little bit about staffing. And by the way, did the Office of Consumer Affairs ever shut down because of COVID?
Mike, I don't have it.
No, we had some staff that was working
Yeah, I don't have
remote.
it. Sorry.
Between, I guess it was March 19th, when the county officially went into COVID mode, to September, we had some employees that were working maybe 2 or 3 days a week. But as of September, everybody was back of 2020.
September of 20?
2020.
Okay, so right now the Office of Consumer Affairs is completely open.
That is correct.
In terms of staffing, how many vacancies currently exist right now in the department?
Well, in terms of full staffing used to be in 2014, you had 42 people working there. I really can't answer that question at this time. What is full staffing? I'm still evolving to try to figure out what the full staff could be. I would love more people because I could do more things, but I'm working with OMB with what they're giving me.
Well, you said there were 42 in 2014?
Correct. You're correct,
All
sir.
right. Mr. Hano, you maybe can fill in some of the blanks in terms of, I know that it seems a lot of things changed in 2018.
That's
I
correct.
mean, at some point, we got down to 20 employees.
Right, so between 2018 and 2021, we had 33 employees in 2018, and by January 1st of 2022, we were down to actually 19, then the commissioner and Mary.
So we
making it
went from
21.
33 to 19 from 2018 to 2020, you said?
Correct.
And where did those people go? Did they retire?
They retired.
And it was never replaced.
They were never replaced.
And did you ever bring this issue, or was this a concern for you?
Of course, it was a big concern because it affects the enforcement, it affects licensing, it affects every aspect of the department.
Was that concern brought to the commissioner?
Yes.
Now, do you know how many vacancies we currently have in licensing?
Not offhand. We have.
How many employees do we have in licensing?
In licensing, we only have 3. One of the main things that the commissioner did when he met with OMB was to get 3 admin assistants that the county is going to be looking to onboard, which will be strictly for licensing.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear that we're dealing with some of these issues that are pretty obvious. At least we're dealing with them now. Okay, so just to be clear, when an application comes in now, the check is not cashed upon receipt, correct?
That is correct.
It's cashed only upon the application being approved, correct?
The application being processed.
Processed,
Right. Sometimes issues do come up during the process, such as maybe previous judgments or previous consumer complaint or outstanding violations that were.
And when was that policy changed?
We-
In other words, it was being cashed upon receipt. Now it's being cashed upon processing. When was that change made?
January 4th,
Of?
2022.
I implemented that change on my second day.
Understood. Just want to talk a little bit about unconscionable trade practice. Now, obviously, we're all paying high amounts of fuel prices right now. We're seeing the prices go up exponentially, rapidly. Can you tell me what procedures and policies were in place? And we're seeing gas prices escalate now, obviously, very rapidly, but we've been paying in the $3 plus per gallon price range for about a year and 2 months right now, right? I think we'd all agree with that. At least it's been going up to about $3.50. So what was the procedure and policies in place, Mr. Haino, to monitor and ensure that there was no gouging going on at the pump?
So at the pump, we can only issue unconscionable trade practices necessarily for price gouging during a state of emergency. Since right now there is no state of emergency, and as you said, the gas prices had been going up over the last year, our weights and measures team is proactively checking gas pumps to make sure that the octane is what they're claiming it is, as well as to make sure that you're actually getting a gallon of gas for the price that's being charged. But there is no regulations that sets prices on gasoline.
Unless there's a state of emergency.
Correct.
When was the last time there was a state of emergency?
I believe it was March 19th, COVID of 2020.
Of 2020.
Correct.
So when did that state of emergency end?
I believe it was June, if I'm not mistaken, June 30th of 2021.
So is what you're saying that the only time the Department of Consumer Affairs had any type of oversight over price gouging at the pump was between March of 2020 and June of 2021, at least in recent history?
Right. And
Yes?
yes.
Okay. And in that time period, what was being done to monitor the price at the pump, that nobody was gouging?
Nothing but the regular routine proactive steps of weights and measures, checking to make sure you're getting the right octane for the gallon.
I want to make sure you're understanding my question. I'm talking about the time period there was a state of emergency from March of 2020 until
Yes.
June of 2021. You indicated that at that point, when there's a state of emergency, we're supposed to be ensuring that there's no price gouging going on at the pump, right?
Correct.
And in that time period, I understand we were monitoring octane, but that's not ensuring that price gouging is not happening. So during that state of emergency, was there anything being done by the previous administration to monitor that price gouging was not happening at the pump?
No.
Okay. All right. At this time, I'll open it up. I might have some more questions, but I'll open it up to any other legislators that may have. Okay. Okay. Legislator DeRidge Whitten.
Thank you. Good to see you. It was only a week ago, I guess, that we saw you, and we heard most of this in your confirmation hearing. And I was sort of surprised we were meeting with you again so soon, because it sort of is similar to what we said about a week ago. But I have a couple questions I want to start with. Number one, when I understand that you've lowered the number of pending applications. So when you basically send the application back at this point, do you still consider it pending? And you send the check back?
No.
So how many of those were sent back, and how many of them were resolved?
I don't have those exact numbers, but the ones that are resolved will show in the system as being licensed, because when they resubmit, if they submit a complete renewal that has everything in it, they turn over in the system as licensed.
Correct.
If they are sent back, we always send the license renewals basically a month and a half prior to the expiration. Mm-hmm. So they have a month and a half to submit the proper documentation, which they can do through the mail, online, or in person. So when they submit those renewals back to us and it's missing documents, if it's missing one document, sometimes we even call them to just say, there's one little error, can you please correct it, email us. But usually we do send it back right away on all of them, and then they resubmit it, and then it gets processed.
So out of the 5,800, and now we're down to 2,275, how many of those were granted and how many are just still pending?
So that number of 2,275 reflects the renewals that are outstanding from 2019, 2020, and 2021. You know, there are currently 7 renewals from January 1st to today that are currently in our possession that are pending because of outstanding judgments. So we only have 7 as opposed to the 2,275 that under the previous administration, we just basically collected the check and, you know, tried to notify them of what was
Right.
missing.
But I'm just trying to find out how many of those have been resolved, or are they just
They're
still
not
pending,
resolved.
but they're just not in our
Correct.
system?
The resolved number would be, I guess, the 5,800 minus 2,275, so 61% have been resolved.
Have
you
been
know.
resolved? Every
Correct.
single one of these, even, but didn't you just say that some of these were returned, so they're still pending?
Well, no. You're asking how many have been resolved out of the
No,
2,270.
no, no, out of the 5,000.
5,864. Right, so if you have 5,864, and we currently only have 2,275, I guess that would be 3,599 have been resolved?
Have been resolved, so they've been given their
License.
license,
Correct.
okay, so they're no longer pending.
They're no longer pending.
So, okay, so they're licensed.
Correct.
Okay, so that doesn't include the ones that you sent back with the check and all.
That's correct.
That are still waiting for.
Right.
Okay, so we still have 2,200 pending as of today.
Right, and out of those 2,275, those have all now been contacted, as opposed to previously that they weren't. So all, you know, including those 2,270, they've been contacted and notified of what is missing and what they need in order to, you know, complete the, I guess, turnover from hold to licensed.
Okay,
And that could be, you know, missing insurance documents. It could also include judgments that need to be resolved, outstanding complaints or violations.
okay. So, and then you have an additional 7 so far for this year?
For just this
that are-
year, right.
Okay. So what is the difference between a document, a deck page, and a certificate of insurance?
Sure. The deck page, I'm not an insurance expert, so I do not know, you know, the deck page is part of your overall policy that actually does the breakdown of what you are insured for.
Right.
A certificate of liability allows the insurance company, in this case, to hold Consumer Affairs as a certificate holder, but basically breaks down the description of what you're actually insured for. And by us being a certificate holder, it notifies us if, you know, the contractor decides maybe to not pay their insurance renewal, then we get notified that, you know, their insurance has been canceled.
So who prepares a certificate of insurance?
An insurance company.
Okay, and they list all the limits and everything?
Correct.
Okay, so I actually agree then that you don't need both. I was just
Right.
more concerned that the deck page does mention all the limits and everything else, but you have all that information in the certificate of insurance?
Right, so as opposed to having our licensing staff go through, sometimes deck pages could be 25 pages long. So rather than having our staff sit there and go through 25 pages trying to pinpoint what exactly they're licensed, the insurance company will condense that onto a certificate of insurance.
Does that take a long time to get from the insurance company?
The contract is submitted with their renewal.
Could that be any type of delay for contractors, or not really?
No, I mean, the insurance
not-
company could have that produced within 10 minutes. I mean, you know, we'll have somebody, I just had somebody at the desk the other day that had, you know, they left off the description of operations. The vendor contacted the insurance company, and I had the certificate within 10 minutes, and they were licensed within 15.
Okay. So, there's just 2 other subjects I just want to hit first. Look, 2020 was a very difficult year. Okay? And Commissioner Greg May has been with the county, you know, for since 2010, right, with the
Right.
prior administration. You know, they had a lot of faith in him. He was kept by the current administration. You know, in the beginning I wasn't too sure, but I got to know him a little better, and I thought he was doing a good job. He did come up a number of times and was concerned about backlog as well as staffing, you know, and he was also at that point given taxi. There was a lot going on. Then COVID. There was so many problems with price gouging. I'm sure you saw it on the news and everything else. The masks, the Clorox wipes. I mean, you know, they were like $100 for a spray can of Lysol. We were in survival mode, you know?
Right.
And we had the same staff at that point that we normally did. And these guys didn't, in my opinion, they were all over the place. Our our attention, we were in like a war, and our objectives shifted from, you know, maybe the everyday things to survival, which was these businesses were really taking advantage of people, and this was their lives, you know, weren't being able to get masks and all. So in 2018, when Greg May became commissioner, he inherited a huge problem with the staffing. The real cut occurred during the Mangano administration with the staffing, just so you're aware. You know, just to give you a little bit of a history. I know you were very honest. I have to tell you, I spoke to a number of people after your interview, let's call it, with your appointment, and you were very honest and forthright, which I appreciated. But you know, I'm just giving you a little history that the real cuts came during Mangano. I think we went from 43 employees, excuse me, down to 32. 22, all right. Well, we went down to 32 originally, and then it went down again to 24 under the Mangano administration. Now, I will absolutely admit, you know, we're still understaffed.
I'm sorry, I just want to correct it. We were down to 33 in 2018.
33 in 2018? With salaries?
That doesn't mean that they had 26 employees.
Right.
Okay.
If you're looking at the budget, you also have to consider from 2015 to 2018, Commissioner May was the commissioner of the Taxi Limousine Commission.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at the 18 budget, Taxi Limousine Commission may have still been under their own budget, which would have been separate. So, which they did have their own amount of employees. So while Consumer Affairs may have only had 26, the Taxi Limousine Commission.
Yeah. Okay, and that's what we just wanted to clarify. I know Michelle's off mic, so I'll just repeat what she's saying. I'm sorry about this, Frank, and I know I'm also interrupting, which I'm also trying to be careful of. All right. We have to keep Frank happy or else we're all in trouble. So, okay, so let's, look, we can sit here and blame everybody. And listen, this is not the only department that has suffered during COVID. You know, I just heard we need 700 seasonal employees in parks, 700, because we don't have them right now, you know, and that's going to mean we're probably going to have lifeguard shortage. You know, every department I speak with we're coming out of an unprecedented time, you know, and
Of course.
we're sorry, you know, that you kind of walked into this situation, but what's budgeted is there, and we're going to be here to work with you and to help. But I want to make sure, there was just a couple things that you said, and I'm all for being friendly, but when you mentioned lowering some fines, you're not going to be addressing things like vaping, selling vaping products to children. Or
No.
alcohol, smoking. Are you going to be trying to reduce
No, what we're
fines?
talking about in terms, the way it was explained to me by my staff, we're talking about contractors sometimes and businesses, not things that deal with children or health. Or, when I say lower the fines, the policy was maximum fine for everything. Sometimes with contractors, they make a mistake or whatever. If you hit them with the fine with $500 to $5,000. If you hit them with $5,000 right away, you might put him out of business. You might discourage him. You could really hurt someone. What I'm saying is the fine has to fit, the punishment has to fit the crime. It's not a crime, but you know what I'm saying. We're trying to make it a contractor. Instead of getting hit $5,000, if he gets hit $2,000, he might be more agreeable to pay. So we'll collect that money instead of $5,000. I close up shop. I'm sorry, use my hands a lot. He'll close up shop, and then we lose a business, and he will go work for someone else. Where if we get that $2,000, I'd rather have a little bit than have nothing.
Well, I know that you have a background in law enforcement, so I don't have to tell you this, but we've had a lot of problems with contractors. We've had unscrupulous contractors, and I know most of them are
Unbelievably unscrupulous.
And people's homes have been damaged, people's homes have been lost, you know, so I think us up here, you know, of course we depend on you to use your discretion as to what to charge, you know, but it does have to still discourage that.
Absolutely. No decision is going to be made unilaterally by myself. I'm going to rely on counsel and my deputy. What I was trying to say was, and also I want to stress, I'm here to do a job. I'm not placing blame on anyone. I don't blame anyone for anything. I was hired by the county executive to do a job, and that's what I'm trying to do. But as far as getting back to the fine schedule, sometimes if you hit the maximum right away, it could be bad for business. I'm not saying they're all good people. If they're bad people, which we will look at their prior history. In other words, if it's a first-time contractor, he just started business, he makes a mistake, he screws up, he gets hit $5,000 just as the same as a contractor that has a history of doing it. I don't think the two should be treated the same. That's the point I was trying to make.
I agree with you, but I also like the fact that we're kind of known in Nassau County for being pretty tough on those contractors that take advantage of seniors. And
I have no intention of being lenient. I'm just trying to be more fair and to keep businesses going. I hope you understand my intent.
I do. I just want to make sure and I do respect the fact that you have a law enforcement background, and I'm sure your mind works that way, but that's a real issue. And you know, part of our jobs up here is to protect our residents. And if you hear, you're going to hear, Sandy, we had so many problems with contractors where they would take the money and disappear. I mean, there was a lot of problems.
Believe me, I can't go to any social gathering anymore without hearing the stories.
Okay.
I'm always going to say I'm working in the Parks Department.
And you're only there for two and a half months so far.
I just want to just say, legislator, what the commissioner also, has directed to the office, and what he means is, there's also a big important aspect to bringing, maybe a new licensed contractor that didn't know he necessarily needed the license and may get fined $1,500, first to reduce the fine as long as he applies for a license to come into compliance
I'm
with the law.
all for that, but unfortunately, this is a business, probably 95% of them are great, but that 5% can cause a lot of damage to our residents. And so I just had another technical question. As far as cashing the checks, now last I remember, a check is valid for what, 90 days?
Yes. I think 6 months.
6 months, is it?
It depends. Some money orders are only 90 days. Some checks are 6 months. It really depends on the banking institution.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm just thinking practically, and again, I agree that we shouldn't cash a check unless we're pretty sure that we're going to be granting the license in the near future. But I could almost see that reasoning that, to cash it up front so that we don't have to go back and get another check and have that be another delay.
Our intention is to process the licensing within 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
That's our intention. And I think we're going to achieve that goal with new staff. I think we'll achieve that goal rapidly. But what the way it was explained to me, the check was cashed immediately before any contact was made with the vendor or the contractor, the licensee. And that's where the problem lied. A lot of them, as you just said, hey, they took my money, we're good to go. Mm-hmm. And I want to get away from that mentality.
It's not the office's policy to hold on to the checks. So that's why if they do send in a renewal with the check, it will be processed within 2 days, and the check will be deposited and the renewal will be issued.
And
the
then
license
if
would
there's a
be
problem,
issued.
the check will be returned.
Correct.
Okay. See, I have to tell you, the clerk's office, I know just because of by accident, I renewed my notary stamp, and I called a couple months, maybe a month into it, and I said, I haven't received my renewal little certificate. And they said, well, did we cash your check? And they didn't know who I was. They didn't know I was a legislator.
Right.
And I said, yes, she cashed my check. They said, well, then you're renewed. And then about 3 months later, I got my certificate. So I believe, I don't know if it still happens in the clerk's office, but that was probably about 3 years ago. So I don't know if it's just this department, or if it's just the way that, accepted practices throughout the county. I'm not sure. But this is not the only time I've heard of a license, which is what that is, being issued, basically being told. I was just a regular consumer on the phone. They had no idea who I was, and they told me, oh, no, you're fine, as long as we cash your check. So I'm just mentioning it might not just be this department that has that practice. So, and again, I have to be honest, when Greg May was hired by Laura Curran, I was a little taken back because I thought, most of the new administrators come in and wipe out everybody and start with new commissioners for every department. And she didn't, you know, we were a little hesitant to keep him, but I did feel that he tried. And again, with COVID and all, I was with him at a number of press conferences. He was stressed out about all the stores. I remember that the South, there were, you know, so he did work hard, and I was actually impressed, and I was impressed with how he handled the taxis. And you know, it wasn't. I can't believe I'm defending Greg May, but I kind of feel like, you know, again, a Mangano person, but I felt that he stepped up to a very difficult time. And I would say between consumer, you know, your department and the fire marshals and the Board of Health, everybody was amazing and went above and beyond. And yes, maybe we slipped behind in a few things, and I don't ever want any contractor to feel that they're not being treated fairly. But again, this was not a normal situation. So I think that pretty much answered my questions. But I did have a question. I'm sorry, I missed your name. Now you work for the county attorney's office, right? You're not under this budget, right?
I don't believe I am.
No, you're not. I don't have you listed.
Okay.
So you're not one of the new employees, correct?
She's from the county attorney's office assigned to consumer affairs.
Right, but you're not under their budget, correct?
Under our budget, no.
Okay, so you're with the county attorney's office?
Yes.
Okay, nice to meet you. Do you have any other? I'm sorry. Do you have any other obligations other than this department?
Not at this point in time.
Do you
To
know
my
if you will
knowledge.
be assigned to other departments, or is this going to be your only one?
I believe this will be my only one.
Okay, good.
I think part of what they're hoping to do is to have me assist with the backlog of hearings. They have like an independent contracted judge, Judge Perry, that does the hearings right now, 1 day a week. And I believe in the past they were up to hearings 3 days a week. So the hope is that I will help clear the backlog by, you know, assisting as a hearing officer on certain cases on Tuesdays.
Okay, good.
So,
All right. I mean, listen, we're all like I told you. I want you to prove me wrong. And my daughter's. Can somebody take this? So I want you to do well. We all want you to succeed.
Thank you.
So can we just go for the record right now? You have how many employees? On board?
Right now, I have, well,
Not
I was
including
considered,
him.
not including her, I have 19 plus myself,
So you have 20. And your
including
budget is-
myself.
Now, was that including the 4 people that you mentioned during your interview for appointment?
No, I met with OMB, and they're going to give me a full-time
Accountant.
an accountant 3, which will help with all.
Can she call her father? Sorry, Frank.
We're getting a full-time accountant 3, 5 new hires full-time, and they're allowing me 3 part-time hires, which will take the pressure off of my front staff. So we'll have meal reliefs and stuff. So if you know the way we operate, we have a front desk where people come to, and that's a critical part of our operation. I have 2 people there, sometimes 1, and sometimes we have a line. So if I have part-time employees that could take the pressure off of some of the clerks that are doing renewals, they could jump in and assist people that come in. So we could make it, when I say user-friendly and more affable, you know, so they're not waiting online, getting annoyed. And that's what we're trying to do. But as far as OMB, an accountant, 5 new employees, and 3 part-timers. We have to meet with civil service to make sure we match the requirements.
And then you're anticipating 5 more.
Well, we have 5
retirees?
people in fiscal 2022 that can retire.
Okay, so you're going to be kind of in the same boat. I mean, you're going to be constantly trying to staff this department. You know, it's just the way that it is.
That's Nassau County.
It's the world, you know. I mean, especially right now, so many restaurants can't staff.
No,
you know, so I think that you know, to try to get, we have you budgeted for 26. So you know, I think that's correct. And look, let's try to get there. And
Well, as long as civil service helps me, I intend to hire 6 people, so I'll be at 26. I'll be at
Good.
my staffing.
So
But they're
let's-
giving me 3 extra part-timers, which will be a great relief.
okay, I hope it works, and I'm glad that the pressures of COVID are receding a bit, so we can get back to focusing on the things that we want to
Yes.
focus on. And I'm sorry. Yeah, we would love to be kept updated, and I want to just say,
Sure.
as a legislator, I understand the. Here we go back to the chain of command, which I don't like, but we're always here, and if there's ever a real problem, people should just let us know. I mean, we all are up here to help everyone, not just the commissioners. We're here. Like, if you were really facing these problems for the last, you're saying the last administration, but I never heard from you. I never heard from anybody really, other than Mr. May, who was trying to get.
Right, well,
staffing.
Mr. May was the commissioner, so you would hear from him.
No, but we can hear from other people too.
I,
and I
um,
understand the chain of command, but we're always here, and our doors are always open.
I
And
did.
I think sometimes good communication between us and anyone is a good idea. Oops, hold on. For each title that you're hiring, are they coming off the civil service list, or
Yes.
that's good? So that'll expedite it.
Yes.
Are they provisional?
That's why I have to meet with civil service to figure out, look at the list, and I want to start the interview process. I want to get this going ASAP.
Okay, I appreciate it. And again, I kind of felt like this hearing was started as sort of an attack with the last administration, and I just don't think that gets us anywhere. We're looking forward. We're praying to God that this pandemic is in our rear mirror, and I don't think it's fair really to hit these people as hard as, unless you walked in their shoes during those dark days, you can't. It's very hard to be the what do they call it, Monday quarterback.
I was there.
It was a tough time. It really was, and the fact that we were able to stay above water amazes me, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the people that put the time in with this department and others. And was it perfect? No. Did some areas suffer? Yes. Can we make improvements? Absolutely. So we're with you, but again, I don't think it's fair to really point fingers at anyone else unless you were really here at that time, which was horrible, horrible dark days, which hopefully we'll never have again. So thank you.
Thank you. I do have some comments, and then I'm going to pass it off for some questions from Legislator McKevitt. But I think it's a little disingenuous to say that you don't want to blame previous administrations when for the last 4 years all we ever heard the current administration and many of the minority legislators do was blame the Mangano administration for every little thing. I mean, there was a rainstorm and it was Mangano's fault. So I think that is what it is. Talking about COVID, obviously COVID had an impact on all of our departments. All over the country it had an impact. All over the world it had an impact. But Mr. Haino, I want to make sure I understand correctly. The backlog that occurred in Consumer Affairs with renewals and new applications, that began in 2018, correct?
Correct.
So 2 years before COVID, anybody ever heard the word COVID, right?
Right. It started in 2018. Correct.
Okay. And that was at the exact time that the current administration made a policy decision that created that backlog, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it had nothing to do with COVID, right?
Correct.
In fact,
COVID didn't help.
well, tell us how COVID impacted it.
Well, I mean, COVID impacted it in the sense of, our front desk was closed. So contractors at that point, the policy was only to email everything in, which, we had a system that allowed them to submit, incomplete applications online. What the system wasn't set up to, I guess, distinguish between, a completed application or not.
But my point is, I mean, look, we're not here, and I know, Commissioner, you said you're not here to blame anybody. Let's not talk about blame. We're trying to identify a problem and make
Correct.
sure we don't create the same issue again.
Absolutely.
And it seems to me, when things are usually very cloudy in government, it's pretty clear what caused this. It was a direct event, a policy decision by the current administration to change the process where they would take your $1,000 check and cash it, and then put it on hold for 3 years. And that caused this mess. Clear and simple. I think we need to identify that so we don't do it again. It's not about blame. It's not about attacking. Yeah, and now I'm glad to hear the policy has changed. It seemed pretty obvious. In terms of us not hearing from you, Mr. Haino, I don't blame you for the current administration, for Mr. May, and not communicating apparently with the county executive of the administration and not pointing out these obvious deficiencies in their new policy. But in any event, just a few more comments. I know that Legislator DeRidge Whitten brought up her notary application. It's not analogous because a notary is a state license. The county clerk's office is a conduit to processing that license. So when your check comes into the county, it has to be cashed. It is then, at that time, sent to the state, at which point you are licensed. The fact that you don't get your license for a period of time is a deficiency with the state, not actually sending you a proper paper license. But if you go on the state website and you go up to the licenses, as soon as that check is cashed, you will see you are authorized to be a notary. So it's not exactly the same, and it's completely, in my opinion, it's completely different than the Consumer Affairs Department cashing a $1,000 check and then taking the application and putting it on a shelf for 3 years. In terms of, again, hearing from you, Mr. Haino, I know there's this idea that we never heard from anybody about this. We heard from our residents. We heard from contractors. We heard from people who were saying, hey, I came and I applied and they cashed my check and I haven't heard anything for 2-3 years. I don't need to hear from you, Mr. Haino. I heard from plenty of people, okay? And I'm sure the county executive did too. And they did nothing. They did nothing to fix that. And that's why I do have some more questions. I'm going to pass it off to Legislator McKevitt, but I want to thank you and County Executive Blakeman for addressing this immediately. And we're seeing the results. It's quantifiable, and it seems to be a pretty easy solution. And by the way, we have the same amount of employees today as we did in December, right?
Correct.
All right. So it's not like you got some influx of employees. You're doing this with the same amount of people. You just changed the policy that was put in place in 2018, and it seems to be working. So thank you for that. I'm going to okay. I'm going to pass it off. I do have some more questions. I don't want to monopolize the microphone. Legislator McKevitt.
Can you just walk me through the enforcement process? I'm a consumer. I have a problem with the contractor. I think they did shoddy work. How does that process go? How I make the complaint? How does it investigate? And how does it come to resolution?
Okay, I'll start you through it, and then Ken could pick up some areas I don't know. We have a complaint form that's online. Previously, you could only make a complaint online, if I was led to believe that was correct.
No, you can mail it in.
Oh, you can mail it in too? Okay. So we'll get a form in. That form will be given to an investigator. The investigator will then contact the complainant, and the investigator will find the details of the complaint. Then he will go out to the scene, to the person's home, and usually take pictures, make a recommendation. Then that investigator will file charges if they believe.
Right, they'll review it for violation.
They'll review it for violations and file charges, and then it goes for a hearing. And at that time, the contractor can try to defend his position, but that's decided by the judge.
How many investigators do you have doing these investigations?
9.
Okay.
So just to piggyback on what the commissioner was saying is, you know, previously to 2018, a complaint would come in, somebody would fill out a contractor complaint. You know, there's a few types of complaints. There's a complaint against an unlicensed contractor, complaints against a licensed contractor, and then sometimes just complaints about maybe a retail store or any type of issue that somebody may be having. We would always refer the complaint, send a copy of the complaint to the contractor to try to redress the issue that's at hand. That was stopped also in 2018.
So, in other words, the whole process was sent to the contractor, let the contractor resolve it on their own and try to make the customer happy. But since 2018, that part of the process was taken out?
Right. Then the commissioner didn't want to send the complaint to the contractor. We would then schedule the contractor for a hearing. Those hearings would be one to adjudicate the violations that may have existed, and then a separate hearing to adjudicate the consumer complaint.
So what is the time frame then between when the investigation came in and when you get to a hearing date?
Are you talking about after 2018?
Yes,
that some of those hearings still have not been heard
4 years later.
4 years later.
What's the statute of limitations on those complaints?
Unfortunately, statute of limitations against an unlicensed contractor is 2 years. So for some of these, they may have expired.
So when it comes down to the point when you get to the hearing, is there an opportunity at that point where there's like for example, a plea bargaining process between counsel, between the spheres, and before you get to the judge, try to resolve beforehand, or does it just go straight to adjudication, and whatever the hearing officer says, the hearing officer says?
We try to settle.
Okay. And what type of staff's involved when that settlement occurs?
So between 2018 and 2021, the commissioner then would only allow an administrative hearing officer to hear the cases, and our deputy county attorney, who was ever assigned to our department, would then act as the prosecutor. But we were times without a deputy county attorney for up to a year, various times throughout. So those hearings alone got put on hold, as well as the process for the way we did hearings. Prior to 2018, we used to do hearings 3 days a week and utilize the deputy county attorney as the hearing officer. From 2018 to 2021, we had a separate administrative judge.
So right now, how many days a week are hearings taking place?
The commissioner has reinstituted the hearings right away. We've so far had 9. With Mary on board, she'll be assisting 1 to 2 days a week, plus the ALJ, hoping to get back up to 3 days a week and get the backlog complete.
When was the last time you held a hearing?
We just held one on Monday.
And before then?
20
week before.
You know, so for 2022, we are, you know, starting to get it back up. We're basically doing 1 a week. Mary just joined us right around President's Day, so we will be picking that up. Prior to that, they were on hold where, you know, we had gone months, and maybe sometimes one hearing would happen with only, you know, 1 hearing day a week with 5 cases.
And in the past, for example, before 2018, how many hearings could you have in a day?
We used to have about 20 a day.
Then went down to 5.
A week.
Okay.
20 a day, 3 days a week. So 60 a week to 5.
All right, thank you.
Legislator Ford, did you have questions?
I do. I'll be very brief because, thank you, by the way, Chairman, Legislator McKevitt touched on the topic that I had about the hearing officers and the amount of hearings that we had. But I just want to thank the Commissioner for making every attempt to bring Consumer Affairs back to the agency that it had once been years ago. And I look forward to working with him. And, you know, and yes, we don't want to point fingers at a previous administration, but we need to definitely address what the problems were in the past. So, but I just wanted to ask on some of the other issues, you know, Commissioner, you know, we touched about the hearing offices and about the contractors' licenses, so forth and so forth. But what about some of the other, I guess, jobs or something that Consumer Affairs is supposed to follow up on, such as, you know, like the ATM machines that are popping up in Nassau County that are being used by so many people. We had passed legislation many years ago that they have to be registered with Nassau County. Have we been able to, do you find that there are a lot of places that are not compliant, or will you be looking into this to make sure that they are compliant?
We are going to be looking into that. The problem is most of my investigators were tied up in licensing. As I could ease the burden on them and I get more staff, and the staff were able to, in real time, address the issue of licensing, we'll have more investigators free to investigate all sorts of complaints. We don't just get it against contractors. There's other complaints against stores, different things. We also have a very robust weights and measure unit that goes out, that checks the gasoline, makes sure, like Kenny said, you get a true gallon. I think in this day and age, that's very important. And make sure you get real octane. You're not paying for 93 and you're getting 90. And with the greatest thing is we now have a full-time county attorney, and I'd like to thank the county attorney for giving us her. We're expecting me and Kenny to be projected in about 3-4 weeks. We're going to be hitting them 3 days a week with hearings. So we'll be starting to get back on track. My goal is to get back to 60 cases a week.
Wow, thank you. I know that when we talk about the contractor licenses, and Chairman Ferretti did, touch upon it, how many contractors were held in limbo waiting to get their licenses so they would be able to do work, much needed work. And many of them lost a lot of money. They lost part of their livelihood. So I appreciate the fact that you are addressing this and you're making this a priority, because the sooner that we can get everybody the licenses and getting them to work, I think is very paramount. But I do want to just touch upon something. It was brought up about Sandy. I was a legislator. Of course, I live in the South Shore, so I'm quite aware of the problems that we had after Sandy. But even at that time, Consumer Affairs rose to the challenge. They came out. They had numerous meetings with many homeowners to explain to them the processes about how to file complaints. They helped them. They actually, at that time, it was Commissioner May as well as Deputy Commissioner Haino, who came up with some sort of funding. Also, Commissioner Farley, I should also point out as well, came out with funding to help some of these people recoup some of the money so that they'd have something to work with. They went after the contractors with undue diligence. The problems that we had with many of these unscrupulous contractors did not come from Consumer Affairs, because I had numerous meetings with them. They made every effort to go after them, to get them so that they can get money back and help these residents, be able to rebuild. But the problem happens to be there was some problems with the DA's office. It wasn't DA Singus's fault, but it also stems once again to state law and some of the restraints that they had. So I do have to say, Commissioner Capice, that Consumer Affairs in the past had always risen to the challenge, despite what problems that we had and what type of hardships that we faced. They always answered the call to help the residents and the people as best as they can. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to let you know, I have a very good relationship with Dennis Farrell in the District Attorney's Office, and we are going to be working with the District Attorney's Office to do certain things, which I'm not going to disclose at this time, to help the consumers and make consumers safe and make sure contractors are doing the right thing.
Thanks.
I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. When you speak to the DA or when you speak to your county attorney, you might want to ask them what the role is regarding price gouging. Because I've been informed by my counsel that if there is like evidence of price gouging, like real clear, unconscionable trade practices, you can, in fact, find these businesses even if it's not in a state of emergency, and that includes gas stations. So you got to really focus on that right now.
We can evaluate that. It's my understanding that the department in the past, it was only during state of emergency when they would enforce the unconscionable trade practices.
No.
Yeah.
It's really if it's glaring, and clearly at times it is.
And what is the authority for that? Like I'm always asking them, what's the authority for that? What's the reg? Because like before I came here today, I looked at the state law, which is the General Business Law 396R, and that's the state legislation. But the Department of Consumer Affairs is empowered by you through the administrative code. So it's very specific about what we're empowered to do. So as an attorney, I'm like, all right, what's your authority for that? Like
my counsel, Pete Kleins, is willing to sit down and meet with you.
Great.
We could do it now, but I'd rather have him speak with you directly because he's very versed on the law. But it is part of your responsibility as commissioner to be in charge of price gouging, including the gas stations right now. And it's something that I understand you've only been there for 2.5 months, but you have to have that as like first and foremost right now.
If you have any complaints of price gouging, please let us know. I will definitely fully investigate
100%,
it.
but it's also part of your your scope. So you gotta be on it, you know, and we're depending on you to be on it.
We are on it.
especially
I'm
these days.
going by what my counsel, legal
Well, now,
counsel
it's
says.
like new revelation, but you're on no matter what, state of emergency or not, it's on you to be responsible for price gouging for gas stations.
I'll confirm with Mr. Kleins, like what the authority, where that is in the code.
We have it.
Or case law.
What was it? We'll give it to you right now on the record, because I feel good having it on the record, because
Okay.
this is such an important, you know, our residents are suffering, and we want, unfortunately, again, it's just like contractors, 95% of businesses are good, that 5% that take advantage are the problem, and that is also under your scope, and we
But
have
that's the
He'll
only
look
thing-
at it to you right now, but I'd like to put on the record, Pete, if you have the section.
Right, because we want to stay within our lane, you know, because we
No,
cannot
no.
exceed our jurisdiction because the power is through the
I'm totally
code.
aware that you're brand new. You've been here since what? Not even a month, and your
No.
commission is very new also. And look, you know, there's always that learning curve, and I understand it. But this is something that is very timely, and you have to be aware of it.
If we have the law, we'll enforce it.
Okay, here it is. Right.
If I may comment, though, with gasoline,
Can I just give
Sure,
this
sure.
for the record, please, if you don't mind? All right, 21-10.2, unfair trade practices prohibited enforcement under the Nassau County Administrative Code dated June 21st, 2018. And again, to get as familiar as you can with this book, Mr. Capice, and I know you depend very highly on your supporting staff, and I see that today. And I guess I really do see the learning curve is still in process, but I
Sure.
think that you should get very familiar with this book. You have a lot of responsibilities. We went through, I forget how many pages, 60 pages of the code, right? 60 pages of the Nassau County, or over 100
Yeah.
of the Nassau County codes falls under your department.
yes, we have 27 separate laws.
So
I've read the book.
You need to really be familiar with those as well as the county code.
Is that the code that was amended in January of '21? Because unconscionable trade practices was specifically changed, because I made that error, looking at the 19 publication of the code, and now there's a different definition in '21.
And I believe the legislature
January
changed that
21.
after COVID, after the price gouging that Consumer Affairs issued during COVID.
All right, well,
Sounds
let's
good.
get clear on gas stations, because that is really one of our top
Well, why don't we
priorities.
get clear now? Because
That's
you
what we're
put, you
trying to
put,
do.
you put something on the record that may not be up to date.
Well, I quoted the book that was quoted from, but let's say, but let's, you know, price, whenever anything is obvious, and I know you're complaint driven as is the Board of Health, but if you see, you know, if there is obvious price gouging, I would have to think that Consumer Reports would have to.
Well,
get involved.
the price of gasoline is a national issue. And just to let you know, over the weekend, from what I saw in the news, gas went up 40 cents a gallon. So the consumer is going to see that. And I'm not saying they're wrong. It could, if it's more than that, that could be gouging. But they get annoyed that the price went up. They immediately want like they're price gouging. So we have to be
But
fair.
it's comparison of other businesses. I mean, that's what happened with the masks. During
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I
And I
agree.
just had one other point, as my attorneys just confirmed this. When we were in COVID during 2020, like the depth of those dark days, we did have a hiring freeze because we had no idea what our budget was going to be like. So that's also a time where all departments seem to have hit a bit of a snag. So again, this isn't the blame game. This isn't anything. It's just to give you a history of your department. There was a hiring freeze in place. So it's all the big picture. Again, sitting here comfortably without masks on, we can point fingers, but it's really, it was an unprecedented time, and I am looking forward to improving your department as well as many of the other ones as well. So thanks for coming back only 3 weeks after you were, or 2 weeks after you were put officially in office, and hopefully we're going to hear from you again maybe in 6 months.
Absolutely. Anytime you have a question, please feel free to call
Yeah,
me.
we'd like you to come back to the legislature like this and have another hearing in 6 months and see, by then you'll have your feet wet, as they say, and maybe have other ideas that we
I serve at your pleasure. Whatever you want me here, I'll
Alright,
be
so
here.
I would like to put on the record that we should meet again in 6 months. And I do have my attorney, Peter Kleins, we'd still see it. It's under, the updated version online is miscellaneous officers. This is under, what is the title, the top one? It's not-
21-10.2.
It's still 21-10.2 under C. It is the same exact verbiage, 14C. So that really puts us on puts us on the line for being responsible for any price gouging. Is that price going up 40 cents a gallon all around? No. It's if there is an unscrupulous business owner.
That was a national news story.
Exactly. But that's not price gouging. That's
Right.
price
You have
gouging is going to happen if there is someone that's charging more than the other, and it's very obvious. And they say it's unconscionable trade practices, and that's what happened
Right.
with the masks. That's what's happened with the Lysol can. That's what happened with so many things, and it could happen with gas. So just be aware of that. It doesn't take a state of emergency for your office to be responsible for
But
it.
when you read the statute, it talks about unfair advantage. It's not a very, it's a higher standard, because even if you look at the state law, the general business law, it talks about, what was that vendor's price margin before this emergency or before the disruption in market and after. So you have to really look at that for the comparison. And also,
100%.
like, if
Can
you're
I
driving.
just go back to the can of Lysol that went from $6.99 to $94? That's obvious right there, and that's
Yeah.
what you're going to be facing.
And that's the
if
price
it happens
margin.
If it happens even if it's $1 more a gallon that someone's charging, and it's not in consistence with other gas stations, we're going to have to. That
Right.
is when we're going to have to come down on these people.
Right. Agreed.
But you
Yeah.
before said that wasn't under your job description unless it was a state of emergency with gas stations. However, I would really like to have that redacted for the record and have everyone know that you are responsible for price gouging for gas stations.
Well, the unconscionable trade practice, because it doesn't
Correct.
say price gouging in in the code, so we have to term it unconscionable trade practice in the sale of gasoline for
100%,
vehicles.
which is
Right.
what $94 for a Lysol spray can
Right.
was.
But then
it's
you're held to-
the same thing. It's price gouging, but it's not called that. It's
Yeah,
it's the same.
so we'll redact that term
Sure,
because
but you know
it's
what?
not
The
in the
bottom
code.
line is it's the same thing. It can be price gouging, which is what charging $94 for a spray of Lysol can is, or it can be unreasonable amount for a gallon of gas, which again is not. They're all unreasonable right now.
Right.
That's not the issue. It's if one particular business takes advantage of the fact that maybe they're in an area that, like, I live on the end of a peninsula. For me to go down to Northern Boulevard even is 15 minutes. So for me to get gas locally is great, except, you know what? Sometimes someone could take advantage of that, the convenience, and have it, and it has to be extreme. It can't just be a little
Yes.
bit. I understand
Agreed.
that.
Right, that's
But
what I was talking about.
That's where you are, and no matter what, state of emergency or not, you are
Oh,
still
we'll get them
responsible for
under that statute. But I was just trying to bring out the point. Any complaint we get, we don't just throw it away. If it's price gouging, we look into it and we investigate it. I was just trying to bring out the point. We had more inquiries when the price went up overnight, 40 cents. People assumed it was gouging, but it was what was happening nationally.
I
But,
totally understand, because I feel
good,
like
then we're on
complaining
the
to
same page.
somebody. But especially, as you know, I have kids that are driving now too, and they have a credit card that they won't give back. Anyway, so, sorry, I don't know. You have to digress and have humor once in a while. But just to make sure that we're under the same, understanding,
We are.
it's anytime there's a disparity of rights of a consumer against a merchant, or as a result of gross disparity between the value received by a customer and the price paid by the customer. So again, that could fall under so many categories, but gas being one of them, okay?
Yeah,
Thank
any
you.
complaint, we will investigate.
Well, you know what? I know you're complaint driven for the most part, but I think that there's also a good part of your group. You're out there doing weights and means. You are also aware of the prices. And if, maybe they should be instructed that you are in charge of making sure that the prices aren't being gouged.
No, and the commissioner has them looking at the prices, but currently, right now, as of today, we are not seeing it.
Okay, well, let's continue to look
Absolutely.
at it. Although we thought
Absolutely. Our weights and
earlier
measures
today
team is
that
out.
that wasn't part of our job description. We'll continue to look at the prices, and I think that it's something, we have to be proactive on, not just complaint-based.
Right, and we do, and we make sure that the signage is always correctly. We make sure that the stores, when they're increasing the gas prices, they change the street sign first as opposed to the signs at the pumps. When they're lowering prices, they lower it at the pumps first, then the street signs. So we are, always monitoring.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that members of the minority are focusing their attention on the astronomical gas prices we're currently paying. But I think that there's some confusion between price gouging and disastrous economic and foreign policy by the Biden administration. So we got to keep the two things distinct. If we want to get to the root of the problem, if there's no price gouging, there's no price gouging, number one. Number two, if we're so worried about the price of gasoline, which we absolutely should be, I would hope that members of the minority would join us in opposing the two pieces of legislation currently in New York State that are pending that would exponentially increase the price of home fuel and gasoline. So let's speak out against the things that are actually happening and get these things under control.
The last I saw, we were in charge of Nassau County, so let's start here. And I appreciate your time again, Commissioner, and I wish you all the luck in the world, and I'm always here if I can help you in any way. And I don't look at it as majority or minority. We're all legislators. We all represent the people of Nassau County. We all want the best for Nassau County, and we all benefit when that happens. So, again, if I can ever help in any way, I'm around.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a few more questions. But just before I do, just in response again, I'm also glad to see that we're now instructing Consumer Affairs that they are in charge of monitoring gas price gouging. Again, Mr. Haino, was that ever done from 2018 until 2022 in Consumer Affairs?
With regards to price gouging?
Yeah, in terms of price gouging and gas pumps.
No.
Okay. So, got a few questions about unconscionable trade practice. Now, throughout the COVID shutdown and situation, the Department of Consumer Affairs issued over $1 million in fines to businesses that it alleged committed unconscionable trade practice. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. How many actual cases were brought?
I believe it was a little more over I want to say 300, okay. 400.
And how many to date resulted in a fine?
Only about 15%. A total revenue of $60,000 collected.
Okay. So, in other words, there were $1 million in fines and only $60,000 were collected?
That's correct.
Why is that?
Because most of the summonses were deemed to be dismissed, that they weren't unconscionable trade practice.
Okay, and this was during the COVID shutdown. Was that from 2020, March of 2020 to roughly today?
Correct.
Okay. Since January of 2022, how many have been issued?
0.
Okay. So we're talking about $1 million of fine levied under the current administration, correct?
Correct.
And out of that $1 million, only 60,000, approximately 15%, actually were found to be unconscionable trade practice?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, just one more question for you, Mr. Haino. Do you recall back in 2020, during the budget process, the majority amended the county executive's budget to increase the headcount by 5?
Yes, I do.
And do you remember what happened? Was that passed by the legislature?
It was passed by the legislature, vetoed by the administration.
Okay. All right. I have nothing further. Do any other legislators have any comment? Okay. Any public comment? All right, then with that, with nothing else, I thank you for your testimony today. I again want to thank you for the work you've put in over the last roughly
8 weeks,
65 days or so, where you've done such an incredible job in getting this backlog down. I commend you and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.